The throne room stretched so wide that a person could barely see from one end to the other. It was larger than entire city blocks on Earth. Crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the clouds, and between them floated platforms carrying delegates from hundreds of alien worlds. At the center of it all, Emperor Kalrith sat on his massive floating throne, his purple-scale body gleaming under artificial lights that mimicked his home star. Kalrith was enormous, even for his species, for eyes sat in his elongated head, each one independently scanning the room below him. 6 arms rested on the carved armrests of his throne, their clawed fingers tapping impatiently. He had ruled the Vraxis Empire for nearly 200 years, conquering world after world, species after species. Nothing surprised him anymore. Until today, the human delegation walked down the long approach to his throne. They looked so small compared to the other species in the room. No thick armor plating, no natural weapons, no intimidating size. Just soft skin, basic clothes, and the kind of desperate hope that Kalrith had seen in 1,000 other defeated species. Ambassador Huang Deho led the group. He was an older man with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. His diplomatic robes were perfectly pressed, but his hands trembled slightly as he stopped at the designated distance from the throne and bowed low. "Your Imperial Majesty," Deho said, his voice steady despite his obvious fear. "We come to request the return of Colony World 7. Our people have lived there for 3 generations. We built our homes there, raised our children there. We did not know we had entered your territory. We meant no disrespect." Kalrith's mandibles clicked together in what his species considered a smile. It was not a kind sound. "Your ignorance is not my problem. Human, the world belongs to me now. Your colonies serve my empire. Your people work in my mines and factories. This is the way of things." One of Deo's companions, a younger woman named Park Yunji, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we are prepared to offer compensation. Technology, resources, trade agreements. Surely we can reach an understanding that benefits both our peoples." "Technology?" Kalrith's laughter boomed through the chamber. Several smaller aliens near the throne flinched at the sound. "What could you possibly have that I cannot simply take? I have conquered species with 1,000,000 years more advancement than yours. I have weapons that could turn your home world to dust in minutes. Why would I trade when I can simply claim what I want?" The human delegation fell silent. They had expected this, but hearing it so bluntly still hit them like a physical blow. They had traveled for 4 months to reach this throne world. They had prepared speeches, offers, compromises, and it was all meaningless in the face of absolute power. Deho straightened his shoulders, preparing to make one final appeal, when Kalrith held up one clawed hand. "However," the Emperor said, his 4 eyes gleaming with sudden interest, "I am feeling entertained today. I will offer you something. A wager." The word hung in the air like a threat. In the galactic community, Kalrith's wagers were legendary. They were always impossible, always cruel, and always tilted completely in his favor. But they were also binding. If someone somehow won, the Emperor honored his word. It was one of the few things he respected. Deho glanced at his team. They had no choice. "What kind of wager, Your Majesty?" Kalrith gestured with one of his 6 arms. The polished floor in front of his throne suddenly split open with a deep, grinding sound. A massive viewing screen rose from below, its surface flickering to life. The image it showed made several members of the human delegation gasp. On the screen was a creature that seemed to be made of nightmares. It stood nearly 8 meters tall, its body covered in thick purple-black armor plating. 6 limbs ending in claws the length of swords tore the walls of whatever chamber held it. Its head was mostly mouth, filled with rows of fangs that looked capable of biting through steel. 3 eyes, arranged in a triangle pattern on its skull, glowed with an intelligence that was somehow more frightening than simple animal rage. The creature roared, and even through the recording, the sound made the human's teeth ache. "This is the Kravax," Kalrith announced, his voice filled with dark pride. "A bioweapon created by the Teshlorn species before I conquered them and scattered their people across my empire. It was designed to be the perfect killing machine. Unstoppable, uncontrollable, and absolutely lethal." He leaned forward on his throne, for eyes fixed on the humans. 17 master trainers from different species have attempted to control it. All 17 are dead. 3 telepathic mind shapers tried to dominate its thoughts. All 3 went insane from the contact and had to be mercy killed. 2 of my own elite guards, veterans of 100 battles, were killed by it just yesterday when they entered its chamber to deliver food. The humans watched in horror as the screen showed footage of the creature tearing through restraints, smashing through walls, moving with speed that seemed impossible for something so large. "Here is my wager," Kalra said, his mandibles clicking rapidly now. "Send someone to tame the Kravax. You have 30 days. If whoever you send can enter that creature's chamber and emerge alive, if they can make it obey even simple commands, if they can prove true control over it, then I will return your colony world. More than that, I will grant your entire species favorable trading status throughout my empire. You will become honored partners rather than conquered subjects." Deo's mouth went dry. "And if we fail? If your champion dies, or if 30 days pass without success, then humanity becomes a vassal state of the Vraxis Empire. Every human world, every colony, every ship joins my domain. Every human becomes my subject, serving me and my empire for as long as your species exists." The terms were insane. One person against an unkillable monster, with the fate of billions hanging in the balance. It was exactly the kind of cruel entertainment Kareth loved. The human delegation huddled together, whispering frantically in Korean and English. Deho knew they had to refuse. They had to find another way. This wasn't a wager. It was suicide with extra steps. "We need time to consider this offer, Your Majesty." Deho began carefully. "Perhaps we could discuss alternative terms, or—" "I accept." The voice came from the back of the human group. Everyone froze. Slowly, they turned to see who had spoken. Walking forward through the delegation was a boy who looked barely old enough to be out of school, let alone part of an interstellar diplomatic mission. The observation room was small and cold, with only a reinforced window separating June from the massive chamber beyond. He sat on the floor with his back against the wall, a small notebook in his lap, watching the Kravax pace back and forth in its prison. The creature was held by 4 separate energy fields, one for each of its front limbs. The fields glowed blue and hummed constantly, keeping the Kravax spread out in an X shape that prevented it from moving more than a few meters in any direction. Every few hours, it would thrash violently against the restraints, roaring until the walls shook. Then it would collapse, panting heavily, before starting the cycle again. June watched it all. He barely slept. Guards brought him food twice a day, but he hardly touched it. His entire focus was on the creature beyond the glass. On the first day, the Kravax roared 47 times. On the second day, 32 times. By the third day, the pattern was becoming clear. The creature wasn't roaring randomly. It roared more when the lights were at their brightest. It roared more when there was noise in the corridors outside. It roared more when the energy fields pulsed at certain frequencies. "Why aren't you going inside?" a guard named Velt asked on the 4th day. He was a Vraxis soldier, smaller than the Emperor, but still twice June's size, with pale green scales and 3 eyes. Unlike many of the other guards, Velt didn't seem to hate humans. He seemed more curious than anything else. "You're wasting time. You only have 30 days. "I'm learning," June replied without looking away from a window. "Learning what? That it's dangerous? We already know that." Velt clicked his mandibles in the Vraxis equivalent of a sigh. "Every other trainer charged in trying to show dominance. You're just sitting here." "And they all died," June pointed out quietly. "Maybe charging in is the problem." He made another note in his book. The Kravax had just scratched at a particular spot on its armor plating for the 3rd time that hour. The same spot, always the same spot. June drew a small diagram, marking the location. Velt looked at the notebook. "What are you writing?" "Observations." "Look." June held up the notebook. It was filled with sketches, numbers, and notes in Korean. "The Kravax favors its rear left leg. See how it shifts weight away from that side. And those armor plates on its neck, the ones it keeps scratching. Something's wrong there. Underneath them, the skin looks inflamed." "It's a bioweapon," Velt said. "It was built to kill, not to be comfortable. Exactly, June said. That's the problem. On the 5th day, June finally entered the chamber. The door hissed open, and he stepped inside for the first time. The Kravax's 3 eyes immediately locked onto him. Its entire body tensed. A low growl built in its throat, growing louder and louder until it erupted into a full roar that made June's bones vibrate. But June didn't run. He didn't charge forward. He didn't even speak. He simply stood there, just outside the range of the restraint fields, his hands visible and empty at his sides. The Kravax lunged. The energy field snapped tight, holding it back. It thrashed and roared, trying desperately to reach the small human standing so calmly in front of it. June stood there for 20 minutes. Then he turned and walked out. That's it. Velt asked, confused. That's your plan? Stand there and do nothing? I'm showing it that I'm not a threat. June explained. Every trainer who came before tried to dominate it immediately. They brought weapons. They shouted commands. They used pain to enforce obedience. The Kravax learned that humans mean pain and fear. I need to teach it something different. Day 6 was the same. June entered, stood calmly, and left after 20 minutes. Day 7, the same. Day 8, the same. The guards thought he was insane. The diplomatic team watching from their quarters thought he was wasting precious time. Emperor Kalrith, watching the broadcast with his court, clicked his mandibles in disappointment. The boy does nothing. This wager will be over in a week, and humanity will be mine. But Ambassador Deho, watching the same footage, saw something the Emperor didn't. Look at the creature, he told his team. On day 5, it thrashed for 10 minutes after June left. On day 7, only 5 minutes. It's getting used to him. On day 9, June brought tools. They were simple things, mostly from his personal belongings. A small utility knife that the guards had allowed him to keep, cloth strips torn from his spare shirt, wire carefully extracted from a broken data pad he'd found in the trash. He studied the chamber's control panel for an hour, reading the symbols in Galactic Common, trying to understand the environmental systems. What are you doing? Velt asked, walking over. The lights are too bright, June said, pointing at the glowing panels in the ceiling. And the ambient noise, there's a hum from the energy fields. It's at a frequency that must be painful for the Kravax. Can you lower both? Velt's scale shifted color slightly, a sign of confusion in his species. Those settings are standard for containment chambers. They've been that way for years. For prisoners and criminals, maybe, but the Kravax isn't a prisoner. It's a living thing that's been in pain its whole life. June looked up at the guard. Please, just try it. Velt hesitated. This went against protocol. But something about the human boy's quiet confidence made him want to help. He accessed the control panel and lowered the lights by 30%. The energy field frequency shifted down several octaves. In the chamber, the change was immediate. The Kravax's thrashing slowed. Its roaring quieted. The 3 eyes blinked as if confused by the sudden lack of constant irritation. By the ancestors, Velt whispered. It actually worked. Over the next few days, June made more changes. On day 10, he convinced the guards to modify the feeding schedule. Instead of dumping all the meat in one pile in the center of the chamber, they scattered it in smaller portions around the space. Why does it matter where we put the food? Another guard asked. Because it forces the Kravax to move. June explained. Right now, it just stands in one place most of the day. The restraint fields keep it from exercising. Its muscles are getting weak. If I'm going to work with it, it needs to be healthy. The guard shrugged and did as requested. The Kravax, given access to the scattered food, began moving around its chamber more. Within 2 days, its movements were noticeably smoother, less stiff. On day 12, June spent 3 hours building something with his collected materials. Wire, cloth, and pieces of plastic from food containers were carefully woven together into a crude brace. On day 13, he entered the chamber wearing the brace on his arm, letting the Kravax see it during their usual session of standing and watching. On day 14, he brought the brace in his hands instead of wearing it. On day 15, June did something different. Instead of standing at the edge of the restraint fields, he walked forward and sat down on the floor. He was close enough now that if the Kravax really stretched against its restraints, it might be able to reach him with its claws. The creature stared at him, its three eyes focused with an intensity that was frightening. But it didn't lunge. It didn't roar. It just watched this strange human sit calmly on the cold floor. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the broadcast from the holding facility. In bars and homes, on massive public screens and personal devices, people tuned in to see the human boy and the monster that should have killed him by now. The reactions were split down the middle. On Earth and its colonies, people prayed and hoped, barely able to watch as June spent hours each day in that chamber with certain death just meters away. On the Vrax's homeworld, citizens debated endlessly whether the human was using some kind of hidden technology or mental trick. Some species admired his patience. Others mocked it as cowardice. But no one could deny what the cameras showed. The Kravax was different now. It no longer spent its days thrashing against the restraints and roaring at nothing. When June entered the chamber, the creature's three eyes would focus on him immediately, tracking his movements with what looked almost like interest instead of rage. When June spoke, even though the Kravax couldn't understand Korean, it would tilt its head slightly, as if trying to make sense of the sounds. The change was undeniable, and not everyone was happy about it. In a private meeting room deep within the palace, far from any cameras or recording devices, 5 Raxus nobles gathered in secret. Lord Catherine, the largest and most senior among them, clicked his mandibles in agitation as he paced back and forth. "This is a disaster," he hissed. "If the human succeeds, the Emperor will look weak, defeated by a child. The entire Empire will question his strength. And he gave away our best leverage," added Lady Velis, her scales dark with anger. "That colony world has rich mineral deposits. We were extracting millions in resources every month. Now he's just going to give it back." "For a bet," spat another noble. "A foolish, arrogant bet." Lord Catherine stopped pacing and turned to face the others. "Then we must ensure the human fails. The Emperor's honor prevents him from breaking his word, but we are not bound by his wager. We can act where he cannot. What do you propose?" Velinais asked carefully. "The creature must kill the boy. That ends the bet, save the Emperor's reputation, and keeps the colony in our hands." Catherine's 4 eyes gleamed with malicious intelligence. "And there are many ways to make a creature violent, even one that's being tamed." Over the next 2 days, they made their preparations. Credits changed hands. Technicians were bribed. A small sonic device was secretly installed in the Kravax's chamber, hidden within the existing environmental systems, where it wouldn't be noticed during routine inspections. The device was simple but effective. When activated, it would emit a sound frequency specifically designed to cause excruciating pain to creatures with the Kravax's particular biology. The pain would drive it into a violent frenzy. And if the human boy happened to be in the chamber at that moment, well, tragic accidents happen. On day 22, their plan was activated. June entered the chamber as usual that morning. He had made incredible progress over the past few days. The Kravax now allowed him to approach closely. It no longer growled when he moved. Just yesterday, he had actually managed to touch its armor plating for a few seconds before the creature shifted uncomfortably and he backed away. Today, he was planning to try fitting the brace he'd made. The Kravax's rear left leg was clearly causing it pain, and June believed the brace might help support the damaged joint. He approached slowly, speaking softly in Korean. "Good morning. I know you can't understand me, but I hope you're feeling better today. The food was better yesterday, wasn't it? I convinced him to give you fresh meat instead of frozen." The Kravax watched him approach, its 3 eyes calm. Its tail, which used to lash constantly, now lay still against the floor. June knelt down about 2 meters away and pulled out the brace. "I want to help your leg. I think this will make it hurt less when you walk. Will you let me try?" He held out the brace, showing it to the creature. The Kravax leaned forward slightly, sniffing at the strange object, and then the sonic device activated. The sound was completely inaudible to humans, but to the Kravax, it was like having knives driven into its brain. The creature's entire body went rigid. Its three eyes widened in shock and pain. Then it began to scream. The roar was unlike anything June had heard before. It wasn't the angry roars of the first few days, or the warning growls when it felt threatened. This was pure agony given voice. The Kravax thrashed violently, pulling against its restraints with such force that one of the energy fields flickered and failed. "No, no, no," June whispered, backing away quickly. "What's happening?" In the observation room, Velt saw the emergency alerts flash on his panel. "The restraint fields are failing. Get the human out now." But it was too late. A second energy field collapsed under Kravax's desperate thrashing. The creature was half free now, still screaming in pain, its massive body twisting and writhing. June ran for the door, but his path was blocked. The Kravax's freed limbs were between him and the exit. He pressed himself against the far wall, his heart hammering. The third restraint field failed. The Kravax was almost completely free now. It could easily reach June. One strike from those claws would tear him apart. The creature was mad with pain, beyond reason, exactly as Lord Catherine had planned. But then something unexpected happened. The Kravax, instead of attacking June, moved toward him, but not to kill. The massive creature positioned its body between June and the wall where the sonic device was hidden, curling around the human boy like a shield. Its armor plating created a barrier, blocking the worst of the sound waves from reaching June. The creature was protecting him. Even in its own agony, even driven half-mad with pain, it was trying to keep June safe. "What are you doing?" June shouted over the roaring. Then he understood. The Kravax was suffering to protect him from something. But what? He looked around desperately, trying to find the source of whatever was hurting his friend. Because that's what the Kravax was now, he realized. Not a monster, not a weapon, a friend who was suffering. June saw the creatures had pressed against the wall near a specific panel, the one closest to where the sound seemed to be coming from. He pushed forward, squeezing under the Kravax's bulk, ignoring the danger, and pressed his hands against the panel. "Hold on," he whispered. "Just hold on." Outside, Veld had finally realized what was happening. The energy readings were all wrong. There was an unauthorized device active in the chamber. He slammed his hand on the emergency override, shutting down all non-essential systems. The sonic device went silent. In the chamber, the Kravax's screaming stopped. Its body went limp, exhausted and trembling. June, trapped beneath several tons of bioengineered war beast, waited to see if he would be crushed. The Kravax shifted slowly, carefully, moving its weight off the human. It collapsed on its side, panting heavily, but it kept one massive limb curved protectively around June. Guards burst into the chamber, weapons ready. Velt was among them, his scales pale with fear. "Don't move, human. We'll secure the creature." "No!" June said firmly, still pinned partly under Kravax's limb. "Leave it alone. It saved me." The morning of day 30 began with unusual silence in the palace. Normally, the great halls buzzed with conversation and the sounds of thousands of beings going about their business. But today, everyone moved quietly, as if afraid to disturb something important hanging in the air. The arena had been prepared overnight. Row after row of seating rose up from the central floor, each section designated for different species and their delegations. By dawn, every seat was filled. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat waiting, their various forms creating a tapestry of colors, shapes, and sizes that seemed to contain the entire galaxy in one space. The human delegation occupied a small section near the front. Ambassador Deho sat rigid in his seat, his hands gripping the armrests so tightly that his knuckles had gone white. Around him, the other diplomats tried to maintain calm expressions, but their fear showed in small ways. Park Yunji kept adjusting her collar. Another diplomat kept checking his communication device, even though no messages could come through during the ceremony. Billions watched on screens across known space. On Earth, entire cities had shut down so people could watch together on massive public displays. In London, New York, Seoul, and Mumbai, crowds stood shoulder to shoulder in complete silence, staring up at the broadcast. On Colony 7, the world that started all of this. June's sister Lee Minji sat at her school's auditorium with 300 other students and teachers. She held hands with her two best friends on either side, squeezing so hard that her fingers ached. She couldn't feel it. All she could feel was a terror that in a few minutes she might watch her brother die. "He'll be okay," her friend whispered. "He's made it this far." Minji couldn't answer. Tears already streamed down her face. In the arena, Emperor Kalrith made his entrance. His floating throne platform rose from below the floor, lifting him high above the crowd where everyone could see him. His 4 eyes swept across the assembled beings, and his mandibles clicked in satisfaction. This was what power looked like. This was the empire he had built. But somewhere in his chest, in the place where his species felt what humans might call conscience, there was an uncomfortable feeling. He had watched every moment of the past 30 days. He had seen the boy's patience, his kindness, his refusal to use force or violence. He had seen the Kravaks change from a mindless killing machine into something that could feel and trust. It had disturbed him more than he wanted to admit. Lord Catherine and his co-conspirators were not present. They sat in prison cells deep below the palace, awaiting trial for sabotage and attempted murder. When Kalrith had seen the footage of the sonic attack, he had felt a rage that surprised him, not because they had interfered with his wager, but because they had caused unnecessary suffering to both the human and the creature. When had he started caring about such things? "Bring forth the human," Kalrith commanded, his voice amplified across the arena. "Let us see if Kim June has earned his people's freedom or sealed their fate." The massive doors at the far end of the arena began to open. They moved slowly, their ancient mechanisms groaning with effort. Everyone in the arena leaned forward, straining to see. June walked out first. He looked so small in that vast space, just a teenage boy in simple clothes. His gray jacket was torn in places and stained from 30 days of hard work. His black shirt had been patched with fabric from other garments. His pants were worn at the knees. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and a thin frame that suggested he hadn't been eating enough. But he walked with his head up, his steps steady, his expression calm. And behind him, with no chains, no restraints, no guard with weapons, walked the Kravaks. The arena erupted in sound. Gasps, roars, chirps, and various alien expressions of shock filled the air. Beings who had seen recordings of the Kravaks as a violent monster now saw it moving with fluid grace, its armor plates gleaming, its movements controlled and purposeful. The Kravaks no longer limped. The brace June had made supported its damaged leg perfectly. The creature's 3 eyes were clear and alert, scanning the crowd with interest rather than rage. Its tail swayed gently behind it, relaxed instead of thrashing. They walked together to the center of the arena and stopped. June turned to face the Emperor's throne high above. The Kravak stood beside him, close enough that its shadow covered the boy completely. The arena fell silent again. The galaxy held its breath. "Your Imperial Majesty," June said, his voice steady despite his fear, "I have completed the challenge. The Kravaks is tamed." Kalrith leaned forward on his throne. "Tamed, you say? Then demonstrate your control. Show us that this is not merely a temporary calm before it kills you." June nodded. He had prepared for this. He turned to the Kravaks and spoke softly in Korean. The words didn't matter. The creature couldn't understand language, but the tone and gestures did. He raised one hand, palm up, then moved it in a smooth arc to the right. The Kravaks moved to the right, following the gesture perfectly. June made a different gesture, and the creature sat back on its rear haunches. Another gesture, and it rose again. They moved through a series of movements that looked almost like a dance, human and beast working together with perfect coordination. The crowd watched in amazement. This wasn't domination through fear or pain. This was cooperation, partnership, trust. "Impressive," Kalrith admitted, though his voice carried skepticism. "But tricks can be rehearsed. I require proof that your control is absolute, even in situations you have not prepared for." He gestured to his personal guards, for elite warriors who stood at the base of his throne platform. "Attack the boy. Show us how the creature responds to true danger." Ambassador Deo jumped to his feet. "Your Majesty," That was not part of the agreement. You're asking for my delegate's death. Peace, Ambassador, Kalrith said, raising one hand. My guards' weapons are set to training mode. They will hurt, but not kill. This is merely a test of the creature's control and the human's ability to command it under stress. Deho wanted to protest further, but he was powerless. He sank back into his seat, his face gray with fear. The 4 guards advanced across the arena floor. They were massive beings, each one a veteran of countless battles, armed with energy staffs and wearing partial armor. They moved in perfect formation, surrounding June from 4 directions. June stood completely still, his heart hammered in his chest, but he kept his breathing steady. He didn't look at the guards. He looked at the Kravaks. The guards attacked simultaneously from all sides. The Kravaks moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. It became a blur of purple-black armor and deadly precision. One guard found his weapon torn from his hands and thrown aside. Another was knocked backward by a careful strike that sent him tumbling, but left him uninjured. The third was pinned to the ground under one massive claw, held firmly but not crushed. The fourth was blocked by the Kravax's armored body, his energy staff sparking uselessly against plates designed to withstand starship weapons. 6 months had passed since that day in the arena, and the galaxy was still talking about it. The footage of June and the Kravax had been watched billions of times. Children across hundreds of worlds played games pretending to be the human boy who tamed the monster. Scientists wrote papers analyzing his methods. And slowly, gradually, things began to change. Colony 7 looked different now. The Vraxis occupation forces had withdrawn within a week of June's victory, taking their mining equipment and military installations with them. The colonists had immediately begun rebuilding, erasing the scars of invasion and reclaiming their home. Fields that had been strip-mined were being replanted. Buildings destroyed during the initial conquest were being reconstructed. It would take years to fully heal, but the work had begun. June stood on a hill overlooking the valley where his family's house had once been. The original structure was gone, destroyed in the fighting, but he and Minji had started building a new one in the same spot. It was smaller, simpler, but it was theirs. Beside him, the Kravax lay in the grass, its massive body relaxed in the warm afternoon sun. The creature's armor plates, which had been dull and scarred from years of captivity and abuse, now gleamed with health. The damaged leg had healed properly with a brace of support. The creature no longer lived in constant pain. It looked, June thought, almost happy. "June!" a voice called from down the hill. He turned to see his sister Minji running up the path, waving a data pad over her head. She was 17 now, having just celebrated her birthday last month. She had deferred her university admission to stay and help rebuild the colony, though June knew she would leave for school eventually. She was too smart to stay on a farming world forever. "What is it?" he asked as she reached the top of the hill, breathing hard. "Another message from Emperor Kalrith," she said, showing him the data pad. "He wants a visit next month. Says he has something important to discuss with you." June scrolled through the message. It was formal and polite, nothing like the mocking tone the Emperor had used during their first meeting. Things had changed between them. They weren't friends, exactly, but there was a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. "And look at this," Minji continued, swiping to another screen. 17 more requests for help. This one is from a species called the Rentar. They have a creature they use for heavy construction work, but it keeps injuring its handlers. They want you to come teach them better methods. 17. June sat down in the grass, feeling suddenly tired. Last week there were only 9. "You're famous, little brother. Everyone wants a human who can talk to monsters." Minji sat beside him, leaning against the Kravax's side like it was the most natural thing in the world. The creature made a low, rumbling sound that was almost a purr. In the months since returning to Colony 7, word had spread about June's methods. The Vraxis Empire had been the first to implement changes. They had reviewed how they treated all captured or created creatures, not just weapons like the Kravax. Lighting in containment facilities was adjusted. Feeding schedules were modified. Handlers were trained to watch for signs of pain or distress. 3 months ago, A Vrax's bioengineering facility had successfully rehabilitated a creature that had been considered hopelessly violent. They had followed June's principles. Observe first, understand the source of pain, address the root cause rather than try and dominate through force. It had worked. Other species had taken notice. The Thalrix Confederation had reached out asking for a consultation on their combat beast breeding programs. The Grenmoth Unity wanted help with creatures they used in mining operations. Even species that weren't part of Vrax's empire were requesting assistance. I can't help everyone, June said quietly. I'm just one person, and I'm not even an expert. I just did what seemed right. That's exactly why people trust you, Minji said. Because you're not trying to be an expert or make money or gain power. You just care about helping. A soft chiming sound came from the datapad. Another message. Minji checked it and her eyes widened. June, this one is from Earth. From the Xenobiology Institute. They want you to teach a class on interspecies communication and ethical creature management. I haven't even finished high school, June protested. You tame the untamable. I think they'll make an exception. She grinned at him. Professor Kim June has a nice ring to it. June shook his head, but he was smiling. The idea was absurd. A few months ago, he had been just a refugee colonist with no prospects and no future. Now people were calling him a hero, a teacher, a bridge between species. All because he had decided to be kind to something everyone else called a monster. That evening, Ambassador Deho visited the Hill. He had remained on Colony 7 after the planet's return, helping coordinate the rebuilding efforts and serving as a liaison with the Vraxis Empire. He looked healthier now than he had during those tense days in the Emperor's court, though his hair had gone completely gray. The Emperor's visit is confirmed, he told June. He'll arrive in 4 weeks with a small security detail. He specifically requested that it be informal, not a state visit. What does he want? June asked. He didn't say exactly, but I have a guess. Deho sat down on a large rock, looking out over the valley. The Empire is changing, June. Karatha's conquest-based rule kept everything together through fear and force. But your demonstration showed there's another way. Some of the conquered species are starting to ask questions. Why do they have to be subjects instead of partners? Why can't they have the kind of relationship with the Empire that humans now have? That sounds like it could cause problems for the Emperor. June said carefully. It could, or it could be an opportunity. Deho smiled slightly. I think you want to ask for your help, not with creatures this time, but with building a new kind of empire, one based on cooperation instead of conquest. June looked at the Kravax, sleeping peacefully in the grass. 6 months ago, this creature had been a symbol of violence and fear. Now it was a symbol of redemption and change. If one relationship could transform so completely, maybe others could too. I'll hear what he has to say, June said finally. For weeks later, Emperor Karatha's ship landed in the valley. It was a small vessel by Imperial standards, carrying only the Emperor, a few advisors, and minimal security. The entire colony gathered to watch, but Karath had requested a private meeting with June first. They met on the same hill where June spent most of his time. The Emperor had to use a personal gravity device to make the climb, his 6-limb body not designed for such terrain. When he reached the top, he stood for a moment catching his breath, looking at the view. Your parents chose well, he said finally. This is a beautiful world. They did, June agreed quietly. Karath turned to look at the Kravax, who watched him warily but without aggression. It looks healthy. Content, even. It is. We both are. The Emperor's mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of careful thought in his species. I have ruled for 200 years, Kim June. I have conquered 1,000 worlds. I believed strength meant the ability to take what I wanted, to force others to my will. You showed me I was wrong. He paused, his 4 eyes meeting June's too. I want to change the Empire. Not quickly. That would cause chaos and rebellion. But gradually, over years or decades, I want to transform it from an empire of subjects into an alliance of partners. Species who choose to join us because they want to, not because they fear us. That's ambitious, June said. And difficult. Yes, which is why I need help. Not military help or political help. I need someone who understands how to build trust, how to see others as they truly are instead of as threats or tools. Kalrith took a deep breath. I am asking you to serve as an advisor to the Imperial Court, to help me reshape how the Empire interacts with other species. June was quiet for a long moment. It was an incredible offer, the kind of opportunity that came once in a lifetime. He would have resources, influence, the ability to help billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. But he would also be leaving his home again, stepping into a world of politics and power that he had never wanted. I need time to think about it, he said finally, and I need to talk to my sister. She's all the family I have left. Of course. Take all the time you need. Kalrith looked out over the valley again. You know, when I made that wager, I thought I was being clever. I thought I was creating entertaining. I never imagined I would learn something. What did you learn? June asked. That strength and power are not the same thing. That the ability to dominate is not the same as the wisdom to lead. That sometimes the weakest-looking person in the room is actually the strongest. The Emperor's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. You defeated me without ever raising a weapon. That is true power. They stood together on the hill as the sun set, casting long shadows across the valley. Human and alien, former enemies, now something like friends. Below them, the colony continued its work of rebuilding, and across the galaxy, other species watched and wondered if they too could find a better way. The Kravax stirred from its rest and stood, moving to stand between June and Kalrith. For a moment, the Emperor tensed, old instincts sensing danger. But the creature simply lowered its massive head, looking at both of them with its three intelligent eyes. Then it made a sound low and rumbling that seemed almost like contentment. June placed his hand on its armor plating. See? Even it knows things are getting better. Kalrith watched the gesture, the casual trust between the boy and the beast. Perhaps there is hope for all of us then. As darkness fell, lights began to appear in the valley below, homes being rebuilt, lives being restored, a future being created, one small choice at a time. The Kravax that no one could tame had never needed taming. The Empire that no one could change had simply needed someone brave enough to try. And the boy who everyone thought was too weak to matter had proven that compassion was the strongest force in the galaxy. The end.